For those of you who know a little bit about my story, secular Jew, and I became a Seventh-day Adventist. And you have no idea of the vast, vast, vast chasms that I had to cross to become, from being a secular Jew to an Adventist. In a sense, I had to be broken into tiny little pieces and put back together again to make it fit. And I think if you'd ask the folks at the GC who know me, they'd probably wonder, even after 26 years there, how good of a fit it really is. And it's not so easy on both sides. I mean, for me, adjusting to Adventism. I mean, so many Republicans. And I had to say that. I had to razz Justin McNeilis on that a little bit on that. Though I'm sure my wife is probably home watching this on the computer, shaking her head and saying, "Oh no, Cliff, don't go down that road. Don't do that." But anyway, the point though in all this is whatever the cultural differences or whatever, the bottom line is, folks, you're stuck with me because I can't be anything else other than a Seventh-day Adventist. But now, here's the thing. There's just one reason, and one reason alone, that I'm an Adventist. One reason and one reason alone that I'm here. And that's the doctrines. That's the teachings of this church. I believe that this is present truth, and that no one else in the world is preaching this message. With all due respect, no one else is even coming close to this. I talked about that in my seminar on the remnant. It's these truths, these wonderful present truths that we have been given. This is what keeps me here and nothing else. Now, I'm not saying that we all have to agree on every doctrinal point. I mean, you should have seen some of the emails. I understand GYC leaders got inundated with emails. People saying, "Don't bring Clifford Goldstein here. Don't bring him here." That's nothing new. I'm the editor of the Sabbath School Quarterly. I'm used to that stuff. But the funniest was, I've been accused of everything. The best one is one of my friends at the GC came back from Florida and he said, "Cliff, somebody down there was telling me that you are a Jesuit infiltrator." The Jewish Jesuit, Clifford Goldstein, the Jesuit infiltrator. I don't know. Do we attract them or do we create them? I don't know. Anyway, there's going to be some amount of disagreement. There's going to be some amount of latitude. We're not all going to see things the same way. But the question I'm asking is, at what point does somebody hold some beliefs that just cross a line and take them out of the fellowship? At what point you can say, "We love you, we care about you, but you have crossed a line"? And folks, if evolution hasn't crossed that line, nothing has. Nothing has. To think that you can meld the teachings of evolution with Adventism, it's surreal to me. It's surreal to me. You can't be an evolutionist and a Seventh-day Adventist. Pick one, pick the other, but have the moral honesty and integrity and the intellectual honesty and integrity to not perpetrate the myth that you can do both. You've all heard of the new atheists, these writers. I've read all of them. Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett. And Dawkins is by far my favorite. He's hilarious. This book, The God Delusion, was very well written. It was funny. I enjoyed every minute of it. The arguments. He's a great writer, and I really think Richard Dawkins is someone who's fighting conviction. I really think he is. His arguments against the existence of God, they were juvenile. It's like, was it who created God? That kind of thing. But Dawkins had one point that he was very clear on. Dawkins was clear. He had nothing but disdain. He had nothing but disdain for the scientists who claim to be evolutionists and yet at the same time claim to be Christians. He called them the Neville Chamberlain school of science. And you know, he was honest enough, Dawkins was honest enough to see that evolution destroys everything that the Bible stands for. And it's pretty sad when Richard Dawkins, whom I kind of call him the Muhammad Atta of the atheist apologetics, when he's got more intellectual honesties than some professed Seventh-day Adventists. But people say, it's science, Clifford, science. I'd say to somebody, if you're struggling with these issues, if you're struggling with the lure, and I know the power and the lure of that, I plead in the name of Jesus, spend some time reading the philosophy of science. It's fascinating to read the philosophy of sciences. Scientists disagree on even what science is. They disagree on, whether it's what is science compared to pseudoscience, compared to good science, compared to bad science. They don't agree. They disagree on what constitutes a scientific proof. They disagree on whether science can ever really prove anything. Some say yes, some say no. They disagree on whether empirical evidence, raw data, can ever even prove a theory. They disagree whether any evidence can ever be called raw data at all. They disagree on the scientific method. They sometimes even disagree if there's anything really you can even call a scientific method. If you're wrestling with some of these issues, take this down. Google the teaching company. Google the teaching company and get yourself a lecture by Dr. Stephen Goldman, or a set of lectures. He's probably an agnostic, and he's probably an atheist, and he's probably an evolutionist. Stephen Goldman, get his series, Science Wars. It will open your eyes to a lot of things. See, the point is, in our culture, the popular idea is that science is somehow the sacral mode of knowledge. That somehow science is the last word on truth. And that's just not true. And nothing has opened my eyes to that more than reading on the philosophy of science. It's funny, there's a joke among physicists. They say all true science is physics. Everything else is stamp collecting. Okay, now I want to get in all that debate, but here's the point though. Two of the most foundational teachings of modern physics, of modern science, is quantum theory and general relativity. They're foundational, they're fundamental, they've been proven to degrees, astonishing. And yet here's the thing, in physics, these two teachings blatantly contradict each other. It'd be like saying, if you believe in the Sabbath, you can't believe in the state of the dead. So these fundamental teachings of science are blatantly in contradiction of each other. So the question is, and meanwhile, we have folks that are going to make a shipwreck of their faith or lead our young people to perdition based on some fanciful speculation about what happened to some supposed proto-RNA, in the African savanna 2.5 billion years ago. If you're struggling with this, I plead, think through the implications of this. If evolution's true, if evolution's how we got here, the book of Genesis is a joke. You can read evolution into Genesis. I can read Marxism, reincarnation, and voodoo into it as well. Think of the mockery it makes of the plan of salvation. How does this work again? God uses a process of violence, selfishness, and dominance of the strong against the weak in order to create a morally flawless being who falls into a state of violence, selfishness, and dominance of the strong over the weak, a state from which he has to be redeemed from or else face final punishment. Bible tells me Christ came to destroy death, the very means that God used to create life to begin with. Can someone please explain to me how that works? And then how do you fit the second coming in, the promise of how do you fit evolution in with the second coming and the resurrection of the dead? Hey folks, most of the dead are pretty far gone. They're pretty far gone. Is resurrection going to be a divine fiat? Is it going to be in the twinkling of an eye? Or are we going to get to go through the joys and rigors of survival of the fittest and random mutation and on and on and on for a few billion years like the first time until we finally get a new world, one wherein dwelleth righteousness? Evolution destroys everything we believe in, everything we stand for. So I plead with anybody, any young person, you're struggling, an old person, whatever, it doesn't matter. Think through the implications of this. You know, a number of years ago, I wrote an article. Called Seventh-Day Darwinians. And in it, I made a point that I thought was so obvious, I thought it was almost redundant. And in it, I made the point was that if you truly believe in evolution, don't you think the only honest thing to do would be to take your conclusions, your views to their logical conclusion, and not remain in a church whose very name, Seventh-day Adventist, denies the whole idea of evolution? Is it too much to ask someone who takes the name Seventh-day Adventist to at least believe in what the name itself stands for? Apparently for some it was too much. And don't even get me started. Don't even get me started on the lack of moral integrity of those who stand in our pulpits and stand in our classrooms and who teach evolution as truth to our young people. They don't have the right to do that. David yesterday called it a tragedy. You know, I understand the need to be redemptive. But I ask the question, how many of our young people do we sacrifice in the meantime while we're trying to be redemptive? You know, I read the other day someone defending this, and they said, well, the students or professors or teach the students to see the handiwork of God in nature. Big deal. Osama bin Laden could probably teach his jihadists the same thing. They could see the handiwork of God in nature. Folks, the bottom line, though, there is good news in all this. The good news in this, and David said it yesterday, is that our church as a whole, as a denomination, has not budged 1 millimeter on the teaching of a literal six-day creation. The intellectually honest among us know what's at stake. And I believe that the vast, vast majority of our church leaders and the vast, vast majority of our lay people are solid as a rock on this, and we will not be budged. We will not move on this. As I said, I'm an Adventist because of the teachings of this church. That's the only reason I'm here. Church has been good to me. It's been good to me. I've been at the GC 26 years. Considered a privilege to be there the day I got there, and every day I'm there I consider it a privilege to be there. Pay ain't great, and retirement, the Lord delays. Retirement scares me to death. Told my wife, says, you're going to be the one standing there at Walmart and saying welcome to Walmart, not me in retirement. So she better do something about it. The church has been good to me. But no matter how good they are, despite all that, I am an Adventist only because of the teachings. And nothing is more calculated to destroy the teachings of this church than evolution, which is why I will never stop speaking out against it and the idea that it can somehow be incorporated into our message. Again, if you're struggling, think of the implications. Think of the implications of where evolution will take you. But in the end, and I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to end on this note. I guess that's a slight hint. It's time to go. You know, slight hint. It's time to go. Luckily, they don't got a hook or something to pull me out. But in the end, the bottom line is be an Adventist or be an evolutionist. But please, please have the moral and intellectual integrity not to promulgate the farce that you can be both, because that's what it is. It's a farce.